Welcome to NFL Nexus, everyone. I am so incredibly pumped to have you with us today. Okay, let's dive into this because we are going straight under the microscope to bring you a highly detailed, deeply comprehensive explainer of the Indianapolis Colts 2026 NFL Draft strategy. Now listen, this is a truly fascinating draft class to study, mainly because the Colts found themselves in a highly precarious, frankly stressful situation. They were forced to navigate the entire first round from the sidelines, just watching the elite talent fly off the board. They had to rely entirely on their day 2 and day 3 picks to try and inject some serious life back to a roster that had real legitimate playoff aspirations last season, but ultimately fell short. So what we're going to do today is break down every single selection. We're talking about analyzing the micro-narratives surrounding these prospects, the expert scouting reports from Yardbarker and Clutch Points, and trying to figure out exactly what the front office's master plan really was. But real quick before we get into the weeds, a massive thank you to everyone who supports NFL Nexus. Do me a quick favor, hit that subscribe button, like this explainer, and definitely drop a comment below with your own thoughts as we go along. And hey, if you want to support the channel in a really fun way, we've just launched our brand new NFL Nexus coloring books. I am absolutely loving these, and honestly, they are absolutely perfect for children, for your grandchildren, and yes, even for adults who just want to relax and unwind with some awesome football art. It's a fantastic way to support these deep dive explainers we do here. You can grab yours right now via the link in the description below, or just scan that QR code right there on your screen. All right, let's get right into the analysis. All right, here is our game plan for today's explainer. We are covering 5 specific themes. First, missing the first round. Second, securing the defensive core. Third, edge rushing question marks. Fourth, late round offensive gems. And finally, fifth, final grades and verdict. Section 1, missing the first round and the Sauce Gardner elephant in the room. It leads us directly to this fundamental question, right? How in the world do you actually win an NFL draft when you literally do not have a first-round pick? Well, the simple, harsh answer is that you have absolutely zero margin for error. None. Every single day 2 and day 3 pick had to be meticulously, painstakingly calculated. Remember, the Colts are actively trying to rebuild a roster that definitively fell short of contender status last year. When you're missing that premium blue-chip talent injection right at the top of the board, you can't just take wild flyers on guys in the second and third rounds. You can't just cross your fingers and hope. Every single pick the front office makes must have a clear, immediate, and realistic path to the field. And the context here is absolutely crucial to understanding this draft. As the Yardbarker and Clutch Points reports detail in depth, the Colts traded away their 2026 first-round capital to acquire superstar cornerback Sauce Gardner last season. Now let's transport ourselves back to that moment. At the time, that was viewed as a massive, completely all-in move. The Colts looked like legitimate, bona fide Super Bowl contenders early in the year, right? Adding a lockdown elite corner like Gardner was supposed to be the absolute final piece of a championship puzzle. However, as the source material bluntly notes, things went completely south for Indianapolis after that trade. The season just collapsed, the playoffs slipped through their fingers, and now the bill has finally come due in the form of sitting out Thursday night of the draft entirely. That massive mortgage on the future, that is the narrative stage for this entire explainer. They needed to absolutely nail this draft weekend just to get this franchise back on track.
Let's move to and see how this builds in Section 2, securing the defensive core, specifically looking at replacing Zaire Franklin and Nick Cross.
So without that first-round pick, the draft effectively began for Indianapolis at pick 53, right in the thick of the second round. And what did they do? They immediately targeted the absolute heart of their defense. They selected linebacker C.J. Allen out of the University of Georgia to replace the recently traded Zaire Franklin. Now, really think about the massive void Franklin leaves behind in that locker room and on the stat sheet. A gargantuan number of tackles are suddenly up for grabs. But here's the good news. Both Clutch Points and CFN scouting reports are in total agreement that Allen is an absolute force against the run. Coming from Kirby Smart's elite NFL factory defensive program down at Georgia, Allen has the exact pedigree to be the vocal leader of the Colts defense right away. He has the football IQ and the sheer SEC physicality to step right in on day 1 and command respect. Then, moving into the third round at pick 78, they shifted their focus to the back end of the secondary, grabbing LSU safety A.J. Halsey to replace Nick Cross as strong safety.
And I want you to check out this number right here, 8. That is the number of interceptions A.J. Halsey racked up over his last 2 seasons at LSU. It's a fantastic stat. Clutch Points elaborates heavily on his dual threat ability, which, frankly, is so incredibly rare to find sitting there in the third round. He is a deep ball hawk down the field who can track the pass, but, and this is the key, he also possesses the physical traits, the sheer muscle, to step right up into the box and brutally sniff out the run. He's effectively a multi-dimensional chess piece for this defensive secondary.
Just listen to how College Football News describes Halsey. This is great. A very smart pick on a nasty safety who hits like a truck. You can literally hear the excitement in that scouting evaluation. They absolutely loved this selection, going so far as to call him the best value pick of the entire Colts draft class. They note that he brings a much-needed tone-setting, aggressive attitude to the secondary. CFN even states flat out that Halsey probably should have gone in the second round, and him lasting all the way until the Colts grabbed him in the third was a major win for the Indianapolis front office. But as we dive deeper into the defensive core, things start to get a little controversial. The expert consensus completely splinters when we get to the fourth round. The Colts drafted Oregon linebacker Bryce Boettcher at pick 135. Let's juxtapose these sharply contrasting expert opinions here because it's wild. Clutch Points gave this pick a glowing grade A, praising it as magnificent value. They cited his solid coverage skills and his immediate asset value on special teams, noting how strategically smart it was for Indy to double dip at the linebacker position so that C.J. Allen and Bryce Boettcher could perfectly complement each other for years to time. On the completely opposite end of the spectrum, you have CFN. They straight up labeled Boettcher the biggest reach of the Colts' entire draft. Wow. While they do admit he's a pure wrap-up inside tackler, they strongly argue he completely lacks high-end NFL athletic tools and simply went a little too early in the late fourth round.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is this number, 136. That is the staggering number of tackles Bryce Boettcher racked up last season at Oregon. That number ranked him 6th in the entire nation, 6th. So while CFN might heavily question his long-term, high-end NFL physical tools and straight-line speed, Clutch Points looks at that massive, undeniable 136 tackle production and sees a player who reliably gets the job done. He's a guy who allows the Colts coaching staff to breathe a massive sigh of relief when it comes to replacing Zaire Franklin's down-to-down, reliable tackling production.
Section 3, Edge Rushing question marks, addressing the glitch late in the game.
Okay, so pass rush. Pass rush was undeniably a massive glaring need for this team, but the Colts strangely waited all the way until the 5th round, down at pick 156, to finally address it. They selected George Gums Jr. out of Florida. Now, Gums is the very definition of a raw, converted receiver. As our source material explains, this means he is a player who is actively transitioning from playing on the offensive side of the ball to playing down in the trenches on the defensive line. And obviously, that naturally requires significant developmental time to truly understand defensive operations, hand fighting, and block shedding leverage. It's a totally different world down there. Clutch Points notes that while he might not contribute as an everyday edge setter right away, he's going to get pushed around a bit early on, he does have serious explosive potential if his basic understanding of the defense improves. CFN essentially adds that while you can absolutely forget about relying on his run defense right now, he does have the freakish raw athleticism to act as a specialized third down backfield disruptor while he learns the ropes.
So to try and balance out the extreme rawness and developmental timeline of Gums, the Colts went right back to the edge rusher well in the 6th round at pick 214, taking Caden Curry from Ohio State. But you guessed it, Curry comes with his own unique set of complications. He heavily fits the definition of a tweener. In NFL scouting terms, a tweener is a player who just doesn't perfectly fit the traditional, ideal physical prototypes for a specific position. In Curry's particular case, Clutch Points highlights that his overall ceiling in the pros isn't the highest, largely because of a documented arm length issue, which is exactly what caused him to slide so far down the draft board in the first place. Short arms make it incredibly hard to keep massive NFL offensive tackles off your chest. CFN totally echoes this sentiment, explicitly calling him out as a tweener.
However, and this is a big however, despite being labeled a physical tweener, just look at this on-field production from his time at Ohio State. 11 sacks and 16.5 tackles for loss. You can't fake that. That is highly productive tape against top-tier, physical Big Ten competition. Because of this proven, undeniable collegiate production, Clutch Points actually views Curry as a player who has the motor and the technique to come in and make an immediate impact on the rotation right away, perfectly balancing out the long-term developmental timeline of a guy like George Gums.
But listen, College Football News was absolutely not letting the Colts front office off the hook for their overall edge rusher strategy. Not a chance. They delivered this incredibly harsh, pointed critique. If you're addressing a need in the 5th and 6th rounds, you're not serious about fixing the glitch. Ouch. CFN aggressively argues that the Colts missed out entirely on the elite, game-changing pass-rushing prospects in this draft. They firmly believe that job 2 of this entire draft weekend, right behind upgrading the middle of the defense generally, was finding bona fide playmakers who can actually terrify the opposing quarterback. Waiting all the way until late day 3 to draft a highly raw converted receiver and an undersized tweener? That is a massive, highly debated strategic risk that could haunt them all season.
Section 4. Late-round offensive gems.
sneaky depth, and elite burners.
All right, let's pivot and go into exhaustive, granular detail on these fascinating Day 3 offensive additions. Because while defense was clearly the priority, these offensive picks offer some really sneaky tactical advantages. In the 4th round, they took Kentucky offensive guard Jalen Farmer. Now, Clutch Points smartly notes the Colts already have a pretty solid, cohesive O-line to protect Daniel Jones and open up those essential lanes for Jonathan Taylor. But in the NFL, interior depth is absolutely paramount. The incredible eye-opening detail here from the scouts is that Farmer was essentially flawless in pass protection in college. He rarely allows pressures, he is going to instantly provide fierce camp competition and push for Matt Goncalves' job on the interior line. Then, moving down to the 7th round, they grabbed another Kentucky product, running back Seth McGowan. Clutch Points calls this a brilliant, sneaky need. Think about it. There really aren't many guaranteed carries behind Jonathan Taylor on this roster. But McGowan is a tough, gritty, rotational guy who reliably punched the ball into the end zone with more and more frequency last year. And crucially, he gets to reunite right away with his Kentucky offensive lineman, which makes his transition to the pros that much smoother. Finally, with their absolute last pick of the draft, they grabbed Oklahoma wide receiver Deion Burks. And let me tell you, the experts are universally calling this kid a massive steal.
So the crucial point is this specific metric right here, top 6. Deion Burks finished in the top 6 among absolutely all position groups at the NFL Scouting Combine in the 40-yard dash, the 10-yard split, and the vertical jump. Let that sink in. Finding that extreme level of explosive, elite athletic talent sitting there at pick 254 in the 7th round is just astounding. It almost never happens. He acts as an elite field-stretching, deep-threat burner to immediately pair with Alec Pierce. This gives a Colts offense that already had a pretty great start to last season some seriously sky-high potential going forward. You can't teach that kind of speed.
Section 5. Final grades and verdict. Did the Colts succeed?
Okay, let's painstakingly review the individual grades handed out by the analysts over at Clutch Points to see the big picture. When you look at this, outside of the C+ for George Gums, who again, we already know is a highly raw developmental project, the board is basically littered with A's and B's. CJ Allen gets an A as a plug-and-play immediate leader. Halsey gets a rock-solid A- for his rare dual-threat ball hawk skills. Bryce Botcher gets an A for his 136 tackles, completely brushing off CFN's reservations about his athleticism. Caden Curry gets a strong B+ for his undeniable Ohio State production despite the short arms. And Deion Burks pulls an A as a massive blazing fast 7th-round steal. The overriding consensus from Clutch Points is that the Colts front office managed to find incredible hidden value across the entire board, specifically and surgically matching player skill sets to exact roster voids.
But guys, here's the absolute ultimate irony of this entire draft analysis. I love this. Despite fiercely, fundamentally disagreeing on several individual player nuances, like CFN calling Botcher a massive reach while Clutch Points called him a great value, or CFN completely blasting the edge rusher strategy while Clutch Points praised Curry's production, both expert outlets ultimately arrived at the exact same overall draft grade for the Indianapolis Colts, a solid B. Think about that. Clutch Points argues they earned that B by maximizing their extremely limited capital and finding hidden gems late in the draft. Meanwhile, CFN argues they earned that exact same B simply because they drafted heavy on the defensive side, with Allen and Halsey bringing an essential, tough, physical attitude to build a new foundation around. Two completely different scouting philosophies, yielding one identical final grade.
Before we get to our final thought, if you enjoyed this incredibly deep breakdown, please don't forget to grab your NFL Nexus coloring books. Again, they are genuinely fantastic for children, grandchildren, and adults alike, and you can find them via the link below or the QR code. And of course, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment to support the channel.
And this brilliantly illustrates the lingering dilemma for Indianapolis, doesn't it? They found smart, physical leaders in the middle of the defense, they found an absolute enforcer at safety, and they found some incredible game-breaking speed late in the draft. But with absolutely no first-round pick to lean on and highly debated potentially season-defining lingering questions at edge rusher, did the Colts actually do enough to return to legitimate contender status in 2026? Are they going to be hunting quarterbacks or getting hunted? Let me know exactly what you think down in the comments below. I really want to hear your takes on this. Thanks so much for learning with me today, and I'll see you in the next explainer.